All right, so once again, welcome everybody. My name is Mauricio, and I'm the Associate Director at the UCLA International Education Office. And we're hosting today's Study Abroad for Undocumented Students webinar. My pronouns are he, him, and I oversee the Study Abroad Advising Unit, which is more formally known as the International Education Office. It's usually not usually, it is a UCLA students' one-stop shop for undergraduate study abroad opportunities. And today's webinar is part of our Global Learning Opportunities Week. It's a series of info sessions on various topics, from major specific sessions to funding and scholarships and identity-based sessions like this one today. I'll share a little bit more about this GLOW week that's taking place towards the end of the presentation. But for now, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague. Oh, sorry about that. My colleague, our co-facilitator for today's, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name's Habiba Simzi. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a supervising attorney with the UC Immigrant Legal Services Center. I'm fortunate, very fortunate, to be able to serve the UCLA community, undocumented students, as well as mixed status students, meaning students who are not themselves undocumented, but come from families where members of the household are undocumented. So just to give a brief intro about the UC Immigrant Legal Services Center a little more broadly, as I mentioned, we serve undocumented and mixed status students. We also serve immediate family members, so parents, spouse, siblings, children. We provide free direct immigration legal services, and our services are full scope, meaning we work with you from start to finish. We provide immigration screenings to get a sense of immigration case histories and better understand where folks are coming from, and do free consultations. And then in addition to kind of the gamut of services, including DACA, DACA renewal, advanced parole, we serve TPS folks as well. And we provide assistance with family-based and humanitarian petitions. So I won't get into the nitty-gritty of all the options for immigration relief. This is just a plug for our services to please come on in. In addition to any questions that might come up from today's presentation about advanced parole or DACA status, please come on in and learn more, find out if you might qualify for any long-term form of immigration relief, you or your immediate family members.
Thank you, Habiba. So here's an overview of the agenda for today, just to give you a preview of what we'll cover. We've kind of already started with who we are, and then we're going to slide into why we're putting together this session. We'll discuss a little bit of history of DACA and study abroad from 2014 till today, specifically in the context of UCLA. We'll get into something called advanced parole and travel considerations. We'll clarify those in a bit. I'll touch a little bit on program opportunities, but that won't necessarily be the focus of today's session. We are having other various sessions that will go, dive deeper into that. Should you continue, to be interested in these types of opportunities. I'll discuss funding in the context of DACA and study abroad, next steps, what that timeline would look like. And then we'll close with resources for UC undocumented students, expanding on some of what Habiba just shared. So just resources beyond the context of study abroad in today's session. And we'll wrap up with the Q&A. So if you still have any questions, well, we have some time that, hopefully we can answer those for you. So why this session, or, I guess in other words, what are our objectives here? The reason why we're putting this session together is that study abroad may have become available for undocumented students folks once again. And, if that is the case, we want to demonstrate what this process would entail, what precautions folks need to take. Well, together with that, we're going to be outlining some travel policies that would be impacting undocumented students in this context. We want to showcase resources for undocumented students. We'll give you a very, very, very brief overview of off-campus study options. and then conclude with, what steps you would take if you are interested in pursuing these opportunities. So a little bit of history with our office and our partners on campus. Pre 2017, and more specifically, the between summer 2015 and fall 2016, there was a period of time where we were able to send undocumented students to study abroad. There was a process for students to go abroad and legally re-enter the country. This is going to be a very, very general explanation, which we'll get into deeper, but essentially what students needed to do is have DACA and apply for and receive advanced parole. There's another component that we'll discuss a little bit later in terms of their other considerations that needed to be factored in, but this was sort of the base. You needed to have a valid DACA and be granted advanced parole, which the way that I'm describing it may sound pretty straightforward and a very exciting time for our students, and it really was. But one of the things that I also want to share is that I personally wasn't going through that experience that these students were going through, but it was a tough time. Even though we were being told, yeah, there's a mechanism, there's a process for this, the students that were taking part of this, that there were risks that our students were taking. So there were stressors, because even though that there was this process, there was never a 100% guarantee that things would work out. And our students were very brave and took a chance, and things worked out for us. So fortunately, all of our students that we knowingly knew went abroad, all of them returned successfully back. But there was a lot of unknowns at the time. But ultimately, I think it was a success in partnership with the Undocumented Student Program on campus with our partners. At the time, we were partnering also with the Student Legal Services on campus, and our office, and really the will of our students that took a chance on something like this. Then of course came a new administration. As of when early 2017 came around, at that point we had to sort of change the way that we were working with students. To a degree, we almost had to discourage students, or ask students to really consider whether they still wanted to go through through this process of studying abroad, because of the uncertainty. One day we would hear that there was support for DACA and all this stuff, and then the next day, actually, that words didn't always translate into actions. But gradually it became more and more clear what the stance was for DACA students. And with time, essentially the advanced parole process that allowed students to study abroad, applications stopped being received and processed. So in a sense, it pretty much stopped. There was no longer an opportunity for undocumented students to study abroad. Today, we find ourselves under a new administration that, generally speaking, is more friendly towards the DACA community. Advanced parole applications are active once again, but now there's this other consideration of, what this, there's a new decision by a Texas federal court that Habiba will get more into detail in a second. But because of these things, that there's now still some uncertainty here. So what I just gave you was a layperson's, a non-legal explanation of, what's been going on. It's an oversimplified summary of what's been going on with DACA in the context of study abroad. But now I'm going to pass it off to Habiba, who will dive deeper into the actual workings and nuances of the current states of some of these topics. What exactly is advanced parole, the risks involved, travel policies that folks should consider, and how these are impacting the undocumented students, and the standing of DACA as well. So,
thank you, Mauricio. Thank you for the really helpful background that you provided. So where we are today is advanced parole applications for DACA recipients are currently being accepted and adjudicated or processed by U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And I'll get more into detail about advanced parole itself and the timeline like Mauricio mentioned. What is advanced parole exactly? So advanced parole is permission to travel outside of the United States and re-enter the United States And it is granted by the Department of Homeland Security, under which we have U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, Customs and Border Protection, and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. And so Department of Homeland Security, is the umbrella under which these agencies are housed. And advanced parole isn't limited just to DACA recipients. So just in case anybody on here or in the future is listening to this presentation is a temporary protected status recipient, advanced parole is available to folks with that type of protection as well. In the DACA context specifically, advanced parole is currently available, and it's available for 3 reasons: educational, humanitarian, and employment purposes. Today, since we are partnering with our friends at UCEAP, we're going to be focusing on the educational aspect of asking for advanced parole. If anybody has questions about humanitarian or employment purposes, happy to answer those in a one-on-one appointment and get a sense of sort of individualized considerations for those purposes. But again, today we're just focusing on educational reasons for applying for advanced parole, permission to leave and re-enter the United States. And just a note that's on the slide, and I'll be mentioning this more than once, it's really important when considering advanced parole to consult with a qualified attorney or Board of Immigration Appeals, BIA, accredited representative before making a decision about applying for advanced parole. So if you are a currently enrolled student at UCLA or any of the UC campuses, or are a sibling of a UC student, for example, then you can definitely come see us. All right, so as Mauricio was mentioning in the timeline, where we're at today is that we are in a new administration. We are past the Trump era. However, there are still a lot of sort of litigation factors in consideration when it comes to immigration policies. And one of the ongoing sort of legal battles is about DACA. And with DACA, as of July 16th of 2021, we've had a shift once again in how USCIS is treating deferred action for childhood arrivals. And this is because a court in Texas, in July, a federal district court in Texas that we know to have a conservative leaning judge, determined that the DACA program itself is unlawful. This is important to distinguish from the legal reasoning in the Supreme Court decision that came out last year in 2020, the summer of 2020, which basically left open the question of whether DACA itself was legal. And so I know that for a long time we were talking about the wind up to the Supreme Court decision. And one of the issues was determining whether or not DACA itself was legal. That was one of the challenges. The Supreme Court actually kind of didn't address that question and said that, well, we do see that the way that the DACA program was rescinded by the Trump administration in September of 2017, we think that's unlawful. And so that's what allowed DACA applications to reopen up, so that folks who never applied for DACA before had the opportunity to start applying for DACA. And there's a lot that happened in between that I'm sort of going to skip over for the sake of time. But I know we've all been on this roller coaster of can I apply for DACA? Can I apply for advanced parole? What's going on? So basically where we're at right now, as of today's date, is that DACA renewals are still being processed and approved. And so we highly encourage folks to keep renewing your DACA and do it within the 4 to 5 month window If not earlier, you can always talk to an attorney if you want to get started earlier. AP application, sorry, advanced parole AP is still being processed, and we're seeing approvals for them for current DACA recipients. And where we're seeing a standstill again is back to the DACA initial applications. So folks who have never applied for DACA are most likely, not going to see any word on their DACA application if they submit it. This means that you can still make the consideration of submitting a DACA initial application after consulting with an attorney or BIA accredited representative, but USCIS is just kind of holding on to them, like they're not moving forward as of the Texas decision in July. And so these are sort of the three things that, we want to highlight: DACA renewals being accepted and approved, advanced parole applications being accepted and processed, DACA initial applications being accepted, but being put on hold. One important, larger update that I really want to make a plug for is that the Biden administration has proposed new federal regulations regarding DACA, and this is a way to address all of the litigation from the executive standpoint. And so the way that the DACA rules are currently being written, there are positives and negatives, right? And so I don't have as much time to get into all of the details there, but we highly recommend submitting your comment and having your voices heard. And you can go ahead and follow this link. It will take you to the comment.homeishere.us. You'll notice that United We Dream is also involved in this movement to submit comments. So please make your voices heard in this time period. The comments are due by November 29th. Next slide, please. All right, so as I said that, I'll be highlighting again and again that it's really important before making a decision to travel outside the United States as a DACA recipient or even as a non-citizen who has anything to consider about their status. So before applying for advanced parole, and we particularly want to flag some concerns to take into consideration. So, concerns to really discuss with an attorney is a prior order of deportation or removal. You or your immediate family have ever had a case in immigration court. Definitely want to address that with an attorney. If you've ever had any contact with law enforcement, even if you haven't had an issue with your DACA, definitely want to flag that. If you've ever left the US before without permission to re-enter, so basically you left and re-entered without inspection, and any sort of fraud or misrepresentation that could come up. So even like mistakes in past DACA applications, for example, are just things you want to talk about. I'm not saying that you would be ineligible based on these factors, but super important to talk it over with a qualified attorney so that you're covering your bases. So, and this is, it's an individualized decision, whether or not to travel abroad as a documented person on advanced parole. Advanced parole, again, is permission to re-enter the United States. It's not a guarantee or a right. The only individuals who have a right to re-enter the United States are citizens. And so that means even people who have green cards may be subject, to additional scrutiny based on certain factors that we're not going to get into today. But if you're a documented individual and you want to apply for advanced parole, really talk it over with an attorney and with your loved ones as well, you know, just to make sure this is the right decision for you. Um, these flags that I just mentioned are ones that can come up when you're trying to re-enter the US and are going through what's called secondary inspection with Border Patrol. Next slide, please.
So what I'm going to transition now, thank you for that, Habiba, by the way. What we're going to transition to is a little bit of just a top level overview of study away opportunities. And I'm intentionally using the term study away versus study abroad, and I'll share why shortly. But here's where, you know, I also have to provide sort of our office's stand on sort of this process, given the current state of DACA and the risks involved that Habiba, you know, very clearly has, you know, laid out for all of us. You know, it's really difficult for our office, for the study abroad office, to just outright encourage, you know, our undocumented students to, you know, community to apply for advanced parole and sign up for a study abroad program. We would love for you, you know, to have this opportunity, but there's a lot of, you know, there are risks involved, and it's going to have to be a personal decision that, you know, ultimately the individuals are going to have to make in consultation, as Habiba shared, with your loved ones, and equally important, you know, with an immigration professional to assess your specific situation. But if after everything we shared with you, you know, you are still interested in making study abroad happen, you know, more power to you, and we're here to support you. We're here to help you out through that process. And, you know, for that, what I would say, you know, I guess the next steps is we're having a series of webinars this week. A lot of them have taken place. Some of the foundational ones, like our Study Abroad 101, and a couple of other sessions about financial aid and funding. They're taking place this week. There's a couple of more throughout Friday. But if you've already missed one of the sessions, they're recorded already, so you can access them on the on-demand section. I think that'll be the best place to kind of really dive into, you know, individual programs and learn more about study abroad. What follows is more of a very brief overview of the study abroad opportunities that we offer. I'm going to call this a mini 101. And also provide a couple of advanced parole and DACA specific context for some of these things that would not be covered in other sessions. So again, top level, you know, what is study abroad? Often it's referred to, people know it as, you know, you go abroad and you take courses at a local university. And that is true. That is still a type of experience that we have. You know, this is where a student can go to a university in London and take whatever courses are offered at that university, just like a local student. We offer that, and that is study abroad. But there are other types as well. There's something called UCLA faculty-led program. These are short-term summer experiential courses. I describe them as on the go with UCLA professors. So this is where, you know, a history UCLA professor is leading a program in Paris where there's no classroom. Every day is just a walking tour of the history of Paris. So it's, again, more experiential and on the go, still study abroad, just a little bit different type of experience. There's also intern and research abroad opportunities where you're doing this for academic credit. So you're working, but at the end, you're putting together a paper, more like a 195 or 199 kind of course, and you're still making progress towards your degree. There's dozens other types that we, you know, for that time, as Aviva has shared, you know, we don't have time today to get in this session to get into every single one of them. But this is sort of, I would say that these three types cover about 90% of what study abroad is. So funding, very, very important question. Can students use their UCLA financial aid for a study abroad program? The short answer is yes. And are there scholarships? Yes, there's scholarships to chip away at this cost. But what exactly does this mean in the context of, you know, let's say a student who has DACA? For UCLA financial aid, DACA students can carry over most of their UCLA scholarships and grants for a study abroad program. There are some exceptions, and this is notably for summer programs, which also applies to someone, let's say, who's a US citizen. There are limitations for summer programs and financial aid, which means just you're probably getting a little bit less grant aid. For student loan eligibility, there is the California Dream Loan Program that provides AB 540 students with the opportunity to take out student loans. Not ideal, but again, an opportunity and a way for you to fund a study abroad program. Typically, our understanding is that and by the way, all this information we've confirmed with financial aid, so that's why I feel confident talking about these topics. It's capped at $4,000 a year per student at UCLA, up to a maximum of $20K as an undergraduate student. If you have more questions specifically about UCLA financial aid or student loan eligibility, we would encourage you to consult with the UCLA financial aid office. Now, for scholarships, there are scholarships that UCEAP, so I didn't go into the detail of what UCEAP is, our 101 does, but you'll discover UCEAP is a type of program and they offer scholarships. Those are available for undocumented students. Our office offers scholarships unless they explicitly, I think there's only one really that explicitly says you need to be a permanent resident. If it doesn't explicitly say something like that, you are eligible to apply to those scholarships. And there's other scholarships nationwide that you can also apply. One of the things that I would say for a student who is undocumented or equally a student who is a US citizen, scholarships are a way to chip away at the cost of study abroad. Rarely will we find a scholarship that just covers everything in full. Although, if you are a financial aid student and you have grants and things like that, your grant aid combined with a scholarship could potentially cover the entire cost of the program. Our recommended link to go to explore scholarship opportunities would be what you see here, ieo.ucla.edu/scholarships. And what we also encourage is to apply it to as many as possible, because often you can get more than one scholarship, especially if they're coming from different institutions that are offering these. One thing that I want to also showcase, and I'm going to just give you a brief breakdown shortly in terms of what a financial aid package looks like and what the cost of a study abroad program looks like. But sometimes, and it doesn't matter an individual's documented status, but often people want to study abroad and often people want to go to Europe. That has always been the traditional place to go, so people are really excited about that. But Europe is expensive. So one of the things that we also advocate for is, if you want to study abroad and you want to go to Europe, awesome. I studied abroad in France myself, so I was one of those students. But there are ways to make it more affordable. Sometimes going during the academic year can be cheaper than going for the summer. And think outside of Europe, places like Southeast Asia, Africa, and Latin America can be significantly more affordable to study abroad than a place like Europe. Now, what you see here, huge disclaimer here, these are sample financial aid packages. And for example, you'll see here something, EFC 0. Just because you're EFC 0 doesn't mean that this is exactly what you're going to get, because everyone's financial aid situation is still a little bit different from one student to another. But I'm going to use these 4 or 5 samples just to paint a picture of what to expect in terms of funding and expenses that a student should expect for. So I put together here, actually together with the financial aid office, they helped put together a couple of sample packages here. One of them is for the University of Sussex. This budget is actually a little bit outdated. The programs, I think, is a little bit more expensive this coming year. But again, so if you saw a program that offered you 12 units during the summer and the cost of the program was something like $12K, which is on the higher end of our study expensive programs, this is what a student potentially around that realm of EFC 0 could receive. You'd be receiving you could be receiving the University Grant Dream, Dream Pell Grant, a matching grant, and the Dream Loan. That means that financial aid package is putting together a total of about $10,000 in terms of financial aid, which does include that California Dream Loan. The cost of the program is this. And the cost of the program is everything that you should expect to pay for the program. It includes visa fees. It includes your health insurance. It includes a budget for your round trip airfare. It includes a budget for your meals, your tuition, your books. It's everything. The only thing that it's not going to include is your, if you're studying at the University of Sussex, it's not going to include costs for your weekend trip to London or a weekend trip to Manchester. That's not factored in. That's going to be out of pocket, and that's not factored into this budget. So for a student who is eligible for this type of aid and gets something like this, there is a gap there, unfortunately, right? There is a gap of, let's say for this student, of $2,300. That means this is not financial aid. This would come out of pocket for an undocumented student. If you were to apply some of the scholarships that are telling you, that is a way to chip away at this. I mean, often our scholarships range from at minimum $1,000 to $2,000. So that's a good way to chip away at the unmet need. There is, when you do advanced parole, and we'll talk a little bit more in a few slides, there's a cost to apply for advanced parole, and that's not going to be factored into the financial aid. That's going to be a personal out-of-pocket expense. So that's something to also consider. What other expenses are you going to incur to go through this process? But that's a budget for a summer program where you're taking 12 units. And the reason why this is one of the higher amounts of aid is because you're maximizing your aid. When you take 12 units, that's when you're really maximizing the aid that you can get for a summer program. So in comparison, let's look at in objectively a less expensive program, a program in Italy with the UCLA professor that is $9,700. But notice that the unmet need is higher. So that means that students have to, out of pocket, this, undocumented student would have to pay more out of pocket because you're not getting, you're not maximizing the aid because of the units that are available to you on that program. And this is specific for summer programs. During the academic year, you'll always hit the magical number to trigger your maximum aid. But during summer, often this is the number of units that you're getting. So, again, theoretically, this is a more expensive program, but the unmet need is much better than something like this. I'm getting very technical here, but I think, again, what I want to showcase is just that the what I call it, the MSRP, the main price tag that you see doesn't necessarily mean that, that this one is more affordable than that one. That's kind of the main point that I want to make here. Something now during the academic year, presumably this is now even a much bigger figure, but keep in mind that you would be overlapping this with what you would have paid during the academic year. So it's actually probably a more affordable program. A student with an EFC of 0, so not the most need student, at least on paper. The difference here is, this is what a financial aid package could look like. This is the unmet need for this specific student going to Korea. So, it would be a matter of like applying for scholarships or saving for that difference. There's another program in Japan where that's during the fall. More affordable, unmet need ends up being also closer to this amount. A program in Sweden, this is what the cost of that program looks like, and this is sort of the unmet need for this student. So again, just wanted to give you a picture of what the difference would be of between the financial aid that you would be receiving and the out-of-pocket that a student would have to, again, apply for scholarships or save for to cover the cost of a study abroad program. Other considerations in terms of programs, and so today I didn't cover the names because if I get into names, it's going to get really complicated. But if at any point during your exploration of study abroad programs, you come across something called UCEAP, which is one of our bigger programs, there are no application fees. So you can apply without any financial obligations, which is really awesome. For summer and fall 2022 programs, the withdrawal deadlines, by which you can withdraw without financial sort of obligations, is generally about April 1st or May 1st. Some very few programs have third-party withdrawal fees. That means those are fees that our partner might charge that they wouldn't be able to waive if you were to withdraw late. So one of the things that I encourage students when talking to a study abroad advisor is if you're exploring programs, ask these questions. And if they don't know, ask them if they can help you find out, because they should be able to. Are there any third-party withdrawal fees that a student should consider? Because if you're going through this process and things fall through, you want to make sure that you're not, on the hook for any fees that, you're not going to be able to pay. And are there any out-of-pocket expenses before financial aid is dispersed? Generally, a student would have to pay for their airfare before financial aid is dispersed. So that's something that you're going to have to, front load before financial aid gets dispersed. That's generally true for any student. But sometimes students may have to pay a deposit for housing. And again, you want to be sure, what are your out-of-pocket expenses before you receive financial aid so that you can account for those fees. The most important thing that I just want to make sure students are aware of is that you don't get blindsided by any sort of fees that you have to pay early on. For the rest of our programs that we offer, there's generally a $300 non-refundable deposit. And after April 1st, students are responsible for the full program fee. What I would say is if you're concerned about this, contact those respective programs and say, hey, I'm going through the advanced parole process. I'm an undocumented student. Of course, if you feel comfortable sharing that with them, I want to apply to this program, but I'm just concerned about the financial commitments. Is there any wiggle room or anything like that? In the past, there have been cases where we've been able to work something out with our undocumented student community. It's not something that I can offer or guarantee, but ask questions. My philosophy is that there's no harm in asking if any special accommodations can be made. And in terms of when to apply to programs, you want to apply to a program about 9 months before the start. So for example, right now, our summer and fall programs for 2022 applications are now open. So you can start applying right now. So this is about 9 months before the start of the program. But our deadlines do run through January and some even in February and some even April, although we'll touch a little bit that applying in April for a program is not going to happen because there's a lot of stuff you have to do before then. But usually this is as early as you're able to apply to programs. Study abroad is generally not competitive. There are a few exceptions to that. It's primarily first come, first serve, and provided that you meet any eligibility requirements that the individual programs have. So how does this all fit in the context of an advanced parole timeline? So I know these are very general statements, but hopefully you can use this as sort of an estimate of how to go about this. In terms of a checklist and timeline, pretty much today or as close as today as possible, you probably want to schedule a legal consultation with an attorney and attorneys, whether that's at the UCLA Undocumented Student Program through Habiba or other centers that they recommend. Also today, you want to be looking into applying or renewing your passport. Students would usually be doing this at an embassy or consulate in the United States from which they have nationality. And the reason why I say this right now is because for US citizens, because of COVID, there's been a huge backlog of application processing and it's taken about 4 to 5 months. I actually don't think it's taking that long if you go to the embassy or consulate of your home country. But you just want to get this started earlier because there have been passport processing delays, and you want to make sure that you have a passport, which is a document that's going to allow you to travel in time for the start of your program. As early as possible, contact the financial aid office and let them know what program you're interested in and ask if they can put together a sample eFAN for you so that you get a sense of what kind of package you can get for the program that you're interested in. Also, as early as possible, apply to that study abroad program. So, these are kind of building steps, right? Once you know the program you want to go to, apply or register for it. And when you do apply, this is a strong recommendation because this helps us help you. Notify your study abroad advisor of your plan and your process. If you could share with us, I'm going to be applying to advanced parole. We can process your application sooner so that you get an acceptance letter sooner so that you can apply to advanced parole. And it helps us sort of, if there's anything that we can help out with, then we know. Otherwise, if a student doesn't self-disclose, there's no mechanism for us to know that you are undocumented and going through this process. And the most important thing I think for us is to be able to help you out with that wherever we can. So here's the tricky part. If you're going to be applying to advanced parole, Habiba has shared with us that you sort of want to be doing this about 9 months before the start of the program because there's also a backlog. These are also taking quite some time to, let me use the word process, if that's not the right term. Habiba will correct me in a second, but I'm just going to say process for now. It's taken a while for them to grant these. So check this out. If the earliest, and actually there's a question in the chat about some spring 2022. I'll get to that in a second, but just for general purposes, let's say that the earliest that you can study abroad right now is summer 2022. The earliest that a summer 22 program might start would be June 15th, which is kind of the Monday after finals week, spring quarter. That means 9 months would have been September 15th. So at that point, any program that starts at that point, it's kind of already too late, or at least you're within the window where, it's less assured that you would get your advanced parole on time, which you need to get it before you actually go abroad. But there are other summer programs that start in July and August. So just because this is sort of the earliest, it doesn't mean that you can't still make this happen, but summer is going to start cutting it very, very close already. So, make sure that you do your math for something like that. For fall 2022 programs, the earliest that they would start would be something around August 1st. That means 9 months before that is around November 1st. So that's sort of around the timeline you might gonna have to start doing that. Again, keep in mind, that's the earliest. We have some fall programs that start August 15th, September 1st, September 15th, as kind of the latest. So there's time for this, but keep this, overall checklist and timeline in mind. Now I'm going to pass it off to Habiba that can go into a little bit more of the actual process of applying for advanced parole.
Thank you again, Mauricio. That timeline is really important to know. It's probably one of the main questions we get aside from eligibility. So I'm really glad that you went over the timeline for both UCEAP and advanced parole, given how long it's taking for USCIS to process and grant or adjudicate these. So yeah, so the checklist for what you would need to apply for advanced parole, it's actually not that it's not as much as some of the other immigration applications. So I hope that that's encouraging in terms of being able to get it done pretty quickly. The form itself is called the Form I-131. It's a 5-page form, and with it, you'd be attaching a statement of purpose. So just, writing like a 1 to 2 page declaration. We can help you format that. Just explaining what study abroad program you want to go on, why it fits into your sort of educational goals. You want to make note that your current DACA recipient, what your DACA is valid until, and why this is important to you. So again, we can help you. We've got samples and templates to work with. And in addition, you're going to want to attach evidence for shows that you're going on the study abroad program. And this is where applying to the UCEAP program in a timely fashion is going to be critical, because you're going to take that evidence that you are enrolled in a study abroad program, or you've been accepted into a UCEAP program, for example, and attach it to this advanced parole application. So again, referencing right back to the timeline that Mauricio just mentioned, in order to keep you on track for having what you need to apply for advanced parole. And then the other two things that you need to include are 2 passport size photos, a little 2x2-inch photos, and then a application fee in the form of check or money order or credit card payment form for $575. And as noted here, that is not covered specifically by financial aid. And so if finances are keeping you, or they're the main barrier for you being able to apply for advanced parole, we can definitely discuss. Although it is important to know, as Mauricio mentioned, that there might be several costs in this process, like renewing passport, and of course the travel costs, and depending on where you're going. I'll make a quick plug to say I went to Egypt. I was very privileged to be able to go to Egypt when I was an undergrad, and it changed my life. I'm so glad that's where I was able to go. So yeah, also happy to answer questions about not going to Europe. Next slide, please. And pardon me, I forgot to mention that the image on the last slide is of the document that you will receive if your advanced parole application is approved. This is the document you'll need. Obviously, we redacted it for all names and identifying information that would need to be presented to Border Patrol upon re-entry to the United States. And what is circled in green is the date that one must return by. Next slide, please. So I mentioned this already at the beginning, but again, the UC Immigrant Legal Services Center, we provide the free direct immigration legal services for undocumented and mixed status students and their immediate family members. So if you're a currently enrolled student, again, please come to us for questions about advanced parole. We're happy to do an intake with you. And then here today, we're, virtually at UCLA. So the Undocumented Student Program at UCLA is a fantastic resource. And just in case anybody from another campus is on here, there are counterpart legal services options and centers at the other campuses. If you have any questions more holistically outside of legal services, please come talk to our awesome staff at USP. We have wonderful coordinators. And then in terms of the legal services component, it's myself and our lovely new USP paralegal, Daisy, who take the legal services appointments there. And back to Mauricio. Thank you.
Thank you, Viva. I'll make this a quick plug for this slide here. So everything we've discussed so far is in the context of study abroad, which is studying outside of the United States. There are domestic alternatives, so studying within the United States. Our travel study programs, which are the programs led by UCLA professors, there's actually 3 programs where you can study away from UCLA within the United States. So we have a sociology program in New York, a global studies program in New York as well, and there's Asian American studies program in Guam. So these are alternatives that wouldn't require something like advanced parole. There are other important considerations to take into account when traveling as with an undocumented status, things considering things like real ID. But these are other alternatives where you wouldn't have to go through the process. I'll make quick plugs here for programs that I am absolutely not affiliated with, but there are other programs in UC Sacramento where you can intern at the state's capital, UC DC, interning at our nation's capital. And then there's a program called National Reserve System, which is a fieldwork program, environmental studies-like program where you're going throughout California to do different sites and conducting fieldwork and research. So there are other alternatives to study away from UCLA, which is, I think, a unique and amazing experience nonetheless. That's wrapping up our session here. So here's our Q&A. I don't know if folks have questions. There's one that came through and I think another one. So I'll take a peek at what's going on here. The initial question was if this is applicable to transfer who are, I believe the question was for transfer students who are graduating in spring 2022. So based on the advanced parole deadline, spring 22 would likely not be viable for a student that needs to go through this process. But I will say this, if by the end of spring 2022, let's say summer 2022, you still have degree requirements outstanding, your school or college might let you extend to summer 2022 as a term that you can still graduate and do your, well, actually, let me use that. You can still do your ceremonies, graduation ceremonies in the spring and June, but you wouldn't formally graduate until summer 2022. So if that was applicable to you, you could do that. You would have to do FAFSA one more, sorry, not FAFSA, the DREAM application for financial aid once more for that summer term. It's not ideal because you're still adding an additional term beyond, but that would be an opportunity to still study abroad for summer 2022. But again, super important to consult, whether you still have degree requirements. Otherwise, if you're done with your degree, to be honest, I don't know that it necessarily makes academic sense for you to do something like that, but consult your major and school advisors for that. Let me just clear that. If you want to study abroad in fall 2023, would I have to contact the USP first to go through advanced parole and then reach out to the study abroad programs office? Do you have a recommendation for that, Habiba?
Yeah, so I think that if you've never gotten an intake with us before, it might be useful to just schedule an intake with our office. our paralegal, Daisy, does the majority of the initial intakes. And so she has a good amount of availability in her schedule right now. So definitely take advantage of that opportunity to make sure advanced parole is a viable option for you. If our schedule starts to fill up and it seems like you could get an appointment to talk with the UCEAP staff first, I would recommend either or. It's sort of like a process that will be in tandem anyways. So go ahead and schedule an appointment for whoever you can speak with first. Either way, it's gonna merge. Once we find out if you are eligible to apply for advanced parole and that you're eligible to apply for a study abroad program, and make those timelines work together.
Yeah, I
What
think
do
you
you think,
said
Lisa?
that. I think you said that perfectly. They're independent process, they're parallel process. We're not, we don't have a requirement that you have advanced parole to participate, even though you really would need to. But because we don't have that, they're independent processes that it's students' responsibility to make sure that you're kind of making sure that both of the channels are moving along at the same time. So as Aviva shared, it's completely up to you, who you can schedule a conversation with first. Just sooner than later that you start the conversation, I think that's one of the more important things. Another question here. When will we know if we are accepted into a program? So for something like UCEAP, you will know within 6 weeks after the application deadline. But I've kind of instructed my team, so I oversee the study abroad advising team, to let them know if we know that there's an undocumented student. I've kind of given them the green light to process your application immediately so that you can get an acceptance sooner. Generally for UCEAP programs, if you apply to the program and you meet the eligibility criteria, you will be accepted. But let's say you can apply right now for summer fall program, but we won't make the decision until with the 6 weeks after the deadline. If that deadline is in February, you won't know until March whether you got in, which wouldn't work out for you. So what you would do is you apply to the program today, tomorrow, next week kind of thing. And you let the study abroad office know, I spoke to Mauricio if you want, or I went on Mauricio's session and he indicated if I can get an early nomination. That way, if we can do that, we can give you that letter saying that you've been nominated and accepted into the program, and then you can start the advanced parole process immediately. So that's for something called UCEAP. For our other programs, something called travel study, which is kind of the second most popular one, the faculty-led programs, or global cities or global internship program, those are more like registration process. So they're going to open, I think, between October 20 something and November 15th. Travel study opens November 15th, and it's registration. So if you sign in and you register and you pay your deposit, you're on the program, you're accepted. So at that point, you just write to the travel study coordinators and say, can I get an acceptance letter because I'm going to go through this advanced parole process? They can get that to you immediately. So usually it's a longer process, but if you're in touch with us and communicate with us that you need this letter, we can make things happen a lot sooner. I'll clear that.
I can go ahead and answer this next question.
Oh, excellent.
So if we study abroad, are we able to travel within that country to different states? So as long as you stay within the country for which you were granted advanced parole, it shouldn't be a significant issue. However, please note that the purpose of your advanced parole is to, for it to be an educational purpose. So if you're doing field trips or, going to a library in another state, or, in your study abroad program, that still fits within the scope. Note that you might be asked, what you did, where did you travel, when you went, like upon return, when you're being asked questions in secondary inspection with Border Patrol. So it's safer, it's probably best practice to not just like, go to other parts of the country purely for vacation or tourism reasons. But if you can fit it into sort of your, study abroad reasoning and educational purposes, then it works. I remember, for example, like my study abroad program, they took us to different, major cities as like field trips. So that wouldn't, I'm just thinking like that wouldn't have been an issue, but like some of the other tourism that I did would have been an issue. Um, and definitely is like a note for people who plan to study abroad in Europe, for example. Uh, Please don't visit the other countries. I know it's super easy to hop on a train and go from France to Spain, for example, but it's not authorized unless you specifically ask for a multi-country, unless you specifically requested to be able to travel to the other countries. And again, it's part of your educational purpose and study abroad program.
Thank you, Habiba. We're starting to run a little bit over time, so I'm just going to pass it off to our last contact information slide. So there we go. I don't know if there was something specific you wanted to share, Habiba.
No, just always highlighting free. It is expensive to hire attorneys, like private attorneys in the community. So please take advantage of our services while you can. Even if you're not sure, just come on in. We're happy to do a legal screening with you and give you a free consultation. We love to talk to our students and family members of our students. So please come talk to myself or Daisy.
Thank you. And here's our contact information. So generally we're in 1332 Murphy Hall. Our physical space is still closed. We're hiring front desk staff to be able to open sometime soon this quarter. Otherwise, we're still available virtually. If you go to our website here, ieo.ucla.edu/contact, we have drop-in advising hours that are virtual, and we also do one-on-one advising. Here's my personal email address. If you have any specific questions for me, feel free to write to me directly. By the way, at the end, my intention is to send a copy of the slides to folks that were able to join us today, so you'll have this information more easily accessible. Although it would also be available on the on-demand section of our YouTube channel. I'll just say briefly, thank you for joining us. Now that I've said that, I'm going to answer one more question just so that I can stop the recording. There was just one more question that came in here. If we study abroad, do we have to find our own housing, or will we be provided and we just pay for the cost? Housing is going to vary from one program to another. There are some programs where it's just prepackaged, like everybody just gets, for example, summer faculty-led programs. You're all in the same hotel with a little kitchenette, and it's just like set up for you. Other programs, there might be university dorms, and they say like it's kind of standard, like you don't have to do anything special, but you have to physically enroll and register for the housing part. But it's all kind of pretty easy to do. You don't have to go on Craigslist and find your apartment. There are some programs where you do have to do that. Those are some of the more immersion programs, like our Sciences Po program in Paris. Like the program says, here are the resources on how to find your own housing, and there's a coordinator that kind of guides you, but it's still pretty independent. But I would say for the most part, they're sort of set up for you. You might have to take a step or two, but it's there for you. It's pretty easy. So something I would say you don't have to worry about. All right, so for reals, that wraps up our session. Habiba, thank you so much for partnering us for the session. I think it's a really important one, and whether we further encourage you to study abroad or not, I think the important part is that you have the information available to make the right decision for you. And if you do decide to embark in this journey, we're here to help you out to make that happen. So thank you all for joining us, and have a good day.
Thank you, Mauricio.
Bye.
Bye.